Chapter 8, Statistical Diagnosis. What gets measured gets done. W. Edwards Deming. I have a soft spot for secret passageways, bookshelves that open into silence, staircases that go down into a void, and hidden safes. I even have one myself, but I won't tell you where. At the other end of the spectrum are statistics which I hate with all my heart. Louis Benil. Probability. H.O. Ho. Hartley. Statistical diagnosis measure the quality of the data analysis. They provide 5 broad benefits. Number 1, detecting mistakes or weaknesses, foibles. 2, measuring the accuracy of an analysis. 3, measuring the reliability of analysis. 4, providing insight into interpreting the results. 5, providing insight into potential improved solutions. Statistical diagnoses are important for any analysis upon which we want to make large dollar business decisions. Diagnosis aspects of the data analysis unearthing the shortcomings. The insight that they provide conveys the relative strengths of the components of the data analysis. This can lead to completely new solutions to its iterative improvements. We test that which is testable and merits testing. We evaluate the statistical analysis within the context of the business problem. That is, within our best statistical practice constraints presented in Chapter 1, timeliness, client expectations, accuracy, reliability, and cost. Naturally, the effectiveness of statistical diagnosis varies with the problem. Unfortunately, there are many instances in business, especially amid the fog of war, when analysis is unreliable. After a failure, it is common to hear anecdotal explanations such as the population changed or the data were off. For every failure occurrence, there is no shortage of these potential explanations, all of which mask frailties with the analysis that could be ascertained using statistical diagnosis. The model overfitting problem. Model overfitting is one of the common problems that we assess through diagnosis. We build models by identifying a pattern in the data and finding a structure to express and replicate that pattern. A pattern could be a linear trend or a monthly cycle in the data. We want to find a pattern that will repeat itself in future applications. Unfortunately, there is a strong tendency to fit a model to more than just the repeatable part of a pattern. This is called overfitting. That is, our model is overfit to the data upon which it was developed. Part of the pattern it has captured is not repeatable. Statistical diagnoses provide feedback on the degree to which a model is overfit. These techniques quantify a model's strength and guide us to refining the model so that it will better fit the data. Section 8.1, Overview of Diagnostic Techniques. The more closely a model approaches a complexity of real life, the more difficult it is to distinguish genuine, rare, emergent events from programming deficiencies. Doug Samuelson's theorem. A detailed discussion of statistical diagnostics is well beyond this book. Table 8.1 contains a representative set of families of diagnostic tools. Many of these diagnostic tools are known within the modeling paradigm, and some are generally applicable. We can combine tools from multiple families. For example, a lift chart from the diagnostic families. Tools for performance. Measurement is often combined with data splitting. We will discuss particular statistical diagnosis in sections 8.2 and 8.3. Okay. On Table 8.1, Diagnosis Family Tool Sets and Themes, says Diagnostic Family, External Numbers, Description. Sometimes we have the luxury of using external numbers from outside the analysis to validate parts of all of the results. Diagnostic Family, Juxtaposing Results. Description, solving a problem 2 or more times, usually in a different way. When then compare or juxtapose the results, this is similar to creating external numbers. Data splitting, cross-validation. Data splitting methodologies use part of the data for the analysis and different parts of the data to evaluate or validate the veracity of the results. Resampling techniques with replacement. These techniques reanalyze different partitions in the same database with replacement. This creates a distribution of results. Simultaneous stress testing. Approaches for finding the properties of the results under various possible scenarios. Tools for performance measurement. A huge family of tools for all manner of applications. This is part of the core of statistics. Test for statistical assumptions. Tools for testing assumptions arising from the particular statistical technique employed. Test for business assumptions. Tools for testing assumptions arising from the business situation. Intervals and regions. Intervals and regions surrounding point estimates such as the mean of predictions or around a population. DOS, design of samples. Sample designs with a self-diagnostic quality due to using randomization. These designs validate that the sample is representative of the population. DOE, design of experiments. Designed experiments with a self-diagnostic quality due to using randomization. These designs validate when the analysis and data collected are representative of a causal relationship. External numbers. When available, external numbers provide an independent means of checking values and results. External numbers are from outside the data analysis, are provided independently, and are often obtained prior to the data analysis. External numbers include intermediate and occasionally final numbers, which are usually in the form of rough benchmarks. There is usually a reason why these external numbers cannot serve as a final answer, such as incompleteness. External numbers are often used for validating forecasts and predictions. Intermediate external numbers are particularly valuable for understanding mechanism models. These numbers might originate from similar business problems, presaged industry knowledge, and ancillary information. In this situation, we are using the external numbers to vet the analysis rather than the other way around. The strength of these diagnoses varies a great deal. For models that are tracked historically, we can strengthen the results by comparing a more numerous series of point estimates with their external counterparts. Also, we can look at the confidence of predictive intervals for the differences. We need to avoid confusing virtuous independent external numbers with post-hoc rationalized values. A far less rigorous approach is to finish the analysis and then rationalize whether the results make sense. We do this informally all the time. This reactive approach does have its risks. Example, Figure 8.1 juxtaposes two quarterly sales forecasts, Colossus and Guardian, with the actual sales results. The graph shows that for most quarters, the Colossus forecasts are too high and Guardian's forecasts are too low. Monthly data, a more numerous series, would provide a better comparison. Also, we should look at the interval of the difference between pairs of values. In addition to comparing the two forecasts to external numbers, actual sales, we can gain insight by comparing them to each other. This idea is discussed next in juxtaposing results. Juxtaposing results. When useful external numbers are not available, we can juxtapose different analyses of the same data. This is somewhat like creating our own external numbers. For each repeated analysis, we can solve the problem in exactly the same manner, or we can vary the method, the business quant performing the analysis, and/or entire approach. There are four categories of juxtaposition. By method, analyzing the same data multiple times with different methods. By quant, analyzing the data multiple times with different business quants. By approach, involves comparing completely different approaches starting with the data collection. For example, modeling data from customers who are surveying regarding their perceived purchasing behavior juxtaposed by modeling a sample of actual purchase data. Juxtaposing results includes comparing an analysis to the result from a meta-analysis of existing external analysis. By repetition, solving the analysis multiple times with the same method quant approach. This includes iteratively resolving the problem to refine our technique and building multiple models with different input variables with the same data set. The results can validate the reliability of our answers and provide additional insight. We will discuss juxtaposition by method in section 8.2. Data splitting, cross-validation. The family consists of variations on a standard theme, which is no-split the data into development and validation data sets. We analyze the development training data, and we vet the results on the validation testing data. This addresses the common modeling problem of overfitting. We will discuss this family of methods in section 8.3. Resampling techniques with replacement. This is a family of techniques with regurgitate the data. The idea is to take a sample from the data set, perform an analysis, and repeat. This creates a distribution of results. Resampling techniques can be thought of as inbred stimulation techniques. This family of techniques includes bootstrapping, jackknifing, and permutation tests. This family is distinct from data splitting in two ways. One, we resample with replacements of the data reused in different combinations. Data splitting has one final partition of the data into groups. The partitioning can be complex, yet data in the same group are always analyzed together. There is no replacement or reselection. 2, resampling always creates a distribution of results for comparison purposes. And the essence of data splitting is to compare results from static, development, and validation groups. Bootstrapping is a popular resampling technique where the data are resampled with replacement. It is extremely popular for validating results from small data sets, and it has some statistical advantage over data splitting. We advise bootstrapping the few and data splitting the many. Standard error for model-based group differences, bootstrapping to the rescue by James W. Harden, PhD. To evaluate the efficiency of the intervention on risky sexual behavior of adolescent females, I was provided data of approximately 600 enrollment recruited at a free clinic. The sexually active women were randomized to 1 or 2 treatment groups. A control group received the same source of clients for the client in the clinic, and an intervention group received the usual source of care plus an education-based intervention consisting of 3 live interactive classes. The classes aim to increase knowledge, reduce risky behavior, and alter attitudes among the participants. Each participant provided information through an audio computer-assisted self-interview, ACASI. Biological specimens were collected from each participant so the bacteria, STIs, sexually transmitted infections, gonorrhea, trichomoniasis, and chlamydia could be identified and treated. ACASI and biological information were collected at baseline at enrollment, 6 months post-enrollment and 12 months post-enrollment. Thus, analysis utilized baseline values at a covariate while treating the 2 follow-up data points as repeated measures. One of the aims of the study was to determine whether the intervention significantly reduced STIs, and independent of fitting data to a model based on generalized estimating equations, GEE, random effects, or a pooled independence model. We always identified a significant effective group membership which supported that the intervention treatment was protective, that is, that the intervention group had lower incidence rates of STIs. We chose to interpret specific results of whether the participant had STI based on a logistic GEE model. Exponentiated coefficients have a clear interpretation as an odds ratio, but health researchers typically refer to interpret risk ratios. Although one can approximate risk ratios from odds ratios, the client requested that we estimate the relative reduction of the intervention group incident rates, P2 minus P1 divided by P1, where P1 is the adjusted incident ratio of the control group and P2 is the adjusted ratio rate of the intervention group. This can be estimated using the adjusted means from the fitted model. The adjusted means, linear predictors, are converted to probabilities via the logic link function. The advantage of the client's preferred summary statistic is a clear interpretation. Missing from this, however, is an associated standard error in the p-value. The point estimate unambiguously represents this reduction in the STIs associated with the intervention, but without a standard error, one can't be sure that the difference is statistically significant. Faced with the absence of formulas for this function of adjusted means, we recognize the data could be reused to yield the desired results. We resampled the data at the person level. All observations on a person included or excluded depending on whether the person was sampled. For each of the 200 bootstrap samples, we estimated a logistic GEE model and then calculated incident rate difference. This approach yielded an empirical distribution of the incidence rate difference from which we could easily construct confidence intervals from the percentiles of the collection of data. While constructing such a confidence interval does not necessarily result in a symmetric interval with about the point estimate, the data-driven result was straightforward to calculate and provide the necessary support to justify our conclusions for reviewers of the Journal of the American Medical Association. A kernel density estimate of the 199 bootstrap values illustrates a biomodel non-normal distribution of empirical values, figure 8.2. The point estimate of the relative deduction was 19.08%. The empirical 95% confidence interval was 1.3%. 41.54%, illustrating that the relative reduction was significantly different from zero. Participating in the intervention was protective, which matched inference on the coefficients of the logistic generalized estimating equations fitted model. The technique example, our business example, our proprietary illustrates that bootstrapping can create confidence intervals for difficult problems. Simulation stress testing. Simulation involves generating insight into a business problem by simulating an environment of some aspect of it. The purpose is to understand the typical behavior or the performance under adverse or interesting conditions. There are many types of simulations. Some involve sampling random inputs from known distributions, simulating that will happen based upon these inputs, and generalizing synthetic performance data. Designed experiments can be thought of as a sophisticated type of simulation. Stress testing involves measuring model performance under stimulation conditions of interest, which are usually adverse. This type of simulation test our understanding of model will perform under these conditions. This includes stressing the variables in the model to understand the conditions under which they will fail and overall affect each failure. One common application of stress testing is back test at VAR, value of risk model, as illustrated in Figure 8.3. Tools for performance measurement. This huge family of tools address a broad set of applications. There is a number of univariate and multivariate diagnosis for exploring the data and measuring performance. This includes EDA, exploratory data analysis, data quality checks, and rather large group of model building diagnostics. EDA consists of simple techniques to provide insight into the essence of the data. Their overlap with data quality checks, which protects us from garbage in, garbage out. Model building diagnostics include likelihood statistics, concordance statistics, collinearity diagnostics, graphical representations such as residuals, plots, and life charts. Goodness of fit tests, outlier diagnostics, art of the second power for regression models, model calibration tools, and validation fit statistics, among others. Such diagnostics provide insight or some degree of validation for some aspect of analysis. These tools are particularly important for data mining or observational analysis. Tests for statistical assumptions. The family of test checks the degree to which the underlying methodological assumptions are supported by the data. In the course of applying a method to a data analysis problem, we need to make assumptions. Even non-parametric or so-called distribution-free tools have implicit assumptions. All of this family of tool overlaps with the tools for performance measurement mentioned above. We want to recognize this as a separate thing. For example, one common assumption is that the underlying variance is homogeneous. For this common concern, we can apply Bartlett's test or Levine's test for the homogeneity of variance. Other commonly applied tools include studentized residual plots, Anscombe residual plots, influence statistics, pairwise correlation estimates, and box plots. Test for business assumptions. This is more of a theme than a fixed set of tools. The tools will overlap with those already mentioned, yet we want to recognize this paradigm separately to provide enough focus. For example, in section 2.2, Brian Wine provided us with an example where the business was willing to assume that future promotional activities would be more effective than those in the past. We could devise a test for this assumption early in a promotional campaign. Intervals and regions. Rather than relying solely upon a location estimate, such as the mean, we can construct an interval around the point estimate. For example, an electrician poll for a candidate might be reported as, say, 48% with a positive or negative 3% margin of error. This indicates that this candidate has anywhere between 45% to 51% of the vote. This interval conveys more information than just a point estimate of 48%. Such intervals help us to better envision the uncertainty around a point estimate. This concept can be expanded in three ways. First, we can place an interval around a line estimate, such as a regression model, as well as around a point estimate, such as a mean. Second, we can build intervals in more than two dimensions, regions. Third, there are three types of intervals: confidence, prediction, and tolerance. Confidence intervals surround point or line estimates. Prediction intervals surround predicted values. Tolerance intervals surround a portion of the population values. Interval estimates are incorporated into more sophisticated, such as quality control charts. See Figure 8.4, process control charts, and box plots. See Figure 2.3. DOS, design of samples. DOS is a family of self-validating data collection designs which validate that the sample is representative. The secret is to know how to make the most of randomization. We will discuss DOS in Chapter 10. DOE, Design of Experiments. DOE, Design of Experiments, is a family of self-validating designs that combine data collection and analysis of causal relationships. Again, in the case of DOS, the secret is to know how to make the most randomization. We will discuss DOE in Chapter 10. In the next sections, we will discuss juxtaposition by method and the family of data splitting techniques, both of which are underutilized and deserve further attention. Section 8.2, Juxtaposition by method. The typical application is to perform an analysis on the same data using two methods. The two methods have different underlying assumptions, and different results will reflect these assumptions. This provides two perspectives and can raise intriguing questions. We apply this approach frequently for simple needs like estimating the location of a population. For the salary distribution in Figure 8.5, we might compare the mean, 78,726, and the median, 72,579 values. The difference between the mean and the median is as interesting as the estimated values. A large difference indicates a great deal of skewedness in the data. This is a simple case for illustration purposes. Juxtaposition by method is far more valuable for complex methods, where we might not have the luxury of the illustration graph like Figure 8.5. Also, we can make different types of comparisons. We can contrast well-understood and well-behaved models with black box models, or with more powerful yet less stable models. We can learn a great deal by comparing models with different assumptions and other properties. The genius is in the juxtaposition. A completely different tack is to consider the sensitivity of the business decision to the different methods. Paired statistical models. One application of juxtaposition by method is to apply two different models to the same problem on the ongoing basis. Multiple models are warranted for many prediction problems. In Figure 8.1, the two predictive models illustrate how one model can validate the result of another. The second model validates the first model's overall performance and specific performance for particular cases. We suggest the paradigm of a sophisticated primary model on the front line and the simplistic confirming model as a backup. The primary model should be more accurate at the expense of additional unwanted complexity. It does not need to be simple enough for everyone to understand. The confirming model might be more transparent and make simpler assumptions. While there can be compelling reasons to make the transparent model the secondary one, in practice, this decision is driven by the culture's acceptance of technology. This is the case where the arts of trust building and delegation have large financial payoffs for the shareholder. Section 8.3, Data Splitting. Data splitting is a family of techniques with a common theme, partitioning the data into development and validation data sets. There is no sampling with replacement. That is, data in the same group are always analyzed together. The data from one group might be combined with that of another. But there is one final partition which the data within a group are never separated, no resampling. The analysis, which is often a model, and its component is built on the development data and proven on pristine validation data. If the validation indicates poor model performance, we leverage this information to rebuild. Lift charts like the one in Figure 8.6 are routinely used to illustrate the performance of a new model at the development of validation data sets. The lift chart in Figure 8.6 reveals the new model performs equally well using the validation data, and the new model outperforms the current model. In practice, we would complement this with more rigorous statistical data diagnosis to confirm these results. Once we obtain a validated model, we usually combine the development and validation data sets and re-estimate the results. As cited by Harrell, data splitting only validates a development model, but not the final whole data model. Hence, it is often a good idea to compare the validated results based upon the development data and the results based on the entire data set to ensure the difference is minor. For a well-validated model, there will be a small difference that we might consider this a small improvement in our results. If the difference is large enough to have an economic ramification, then we have to answer trouble. Just how well was the model validated? The trepidation around this comparison is less concerning for large data sets. The data splitting family comprises a number of highly stylized adaptations. We use out-of-time validation to better predict the future. For factor analysis, we perform an exploratory factor analysis to provide a conceptual structure. This is followed by a confirmatory factor analysis performed on a separately collected database dataset to confirm or reject the prior conceptual structure. This is de facto data splitting. We employ k-fold cross-validation to rotate the development and validation roles across k groups. We apply sequential validation to build a hierarchy of layered validation groups. Even with the presence of other powerful techniques such as bootstrapping, there remain business situations we want to engage in data splitting. 1. We need to outsource the work to a separate unproven group. 2. We think there is an advantage to explaining data splitting as opposed to bootstrapping to those which we are collaborating. 3. We want to validate analysis that is difficult or computationally intensive in such a way that is unfriendly to bootstrapping and other techniques. 4. We want to take certain liberties in performing the analysis. For instance, we want to leverage the response to select variables for a model. Coping with hazards. In practice, we will do just about anything with the development data, but playing games with the validation data is verboten. The purpose of the validation data is to measure performance. It must not be used to select or estimate anything it will eventually validate. Never, ever, ever break this rule. There are desperate situations when we cannot create an effective validation data set, such as when an out-of-time data set is too small for validation, or when a binomial response has one category with a small frequency. For these difficult situations, we should consider other methods, and other methods are not possible, then maybe an underpowered validation, too few observations might be the best we can achieve. The next to last option is to abandon the dream and settle for an unvalidated model combining the development and validation data. If for some reason an unvalidated model is deemed unworthy, then our final option is to drop it and move gracefully on to the next approach or project. Another pitfall to avoid is not splitting the data soon enough. For straightforward applications, we will split the data on the onset of our work. There are complex situations we need to split the data with some restriction on the randomization. Finally, the greatest hazard with data splitting is that it's often circumvented. Data that is supposed to be reserved for validation is included in the development data set, and then the results are validated on the contaminated data. This is an expensive problem. K-fold cross-validation. This is an approach that produces a distribution or set of results, cross-validation within resampling with replacement. First, we split the data set into k equal groups. We develop the analysis on k-1 of the parts and validate on the remaining part. We repeat this k times, using each of the k parts to validate the result. K-fold validation and cross-validation takes to the key k. This approach is excellent for clustered repeated measures data. For the special case where k equals 2, we have something like a crossover design in design of experiment. For k equals n, we have leave one out cross-validation, which equals the jackknife. Sequential validation with 3 or more splits. For large enough data sets, we can layer our validation. This layering allows us to access the layers of the models we build them. At the bottom layers, we validate the functional form or derived working components, such as splines, time series functions, coefficients, variable transformations, and so on. As we validate model components, we combine lower layers of the validation with development data into large development data sets. The extra data set splits provide proving ground for intermediate results. Eventually, we perform a final validation of the model's performance in the final layer of the validation data. Figure 8.7 illustrates our approach in taking the idea from the k-th. For example, 1. Build the response and predictors in development 1. Test them on validation 1. Number 2. Build some models with a few functional forms and compare new predictor variables to the response using development 2. Test them on validation 2. Number 3. Build more models in development 3. Pick the best validation 3. Number 4. Build the winning 2 models using development 4. Perform final validation and validation 4. Number 5. In case both of these models fail, we can rebuild 2 more models using development 5 and perform a final validation on validation 5. Number 6. Finally, we re-estimate the 2 models based on the combined development 5 and validation 5 datasets, the complete dataset. 7. As a check on work, we compare the results from the 2 final models built upon development 5 to the results when built upon the complete dataset. In the era of big data, we often have the luxury of discarding development datasets after each use. More data has become disposable.